Welcome into another episode of First to the Floor. Ben Vallis here. Thank you for joining us. Hope you're doing well. Day 2 of the NBA draft. The second round has concluded, and our guy, Brad Stevens, made another pick. No multitude of trades, no Belichicking, just played it straight up. You love to see it. Here to talk all about it with us is Wayne Spooney. Spooney, how you going, man?
You know, Ben, the U.S. men's national soccer team just lost to Panama about 3 minutes before we jumped on, so
Brutal.
That sucked. Yeah, well, we were down to 10 men in the 18th minute, so we almost pulled out a draw. We did not. Very bad. But, as you know, the world's number one purveyor of Anton Watson, always been a huge, long-time fan of Anton Watson. I definitely didn't find out who he was at approximately 6:30 p.m. this evening. But so yeah, man, I'm looking forward to it. Two draft picks, Ben. Two. It's beautiful.
Yeah. 2 future Hall of Famers, or at least Summer League Hall of Famers. Very much looking forward to evaluating these 2 picks in person in a few weeks' time in Las Vegas. But look, let's just get to today's pick. At pick number 54, the Celtics selected Anton Watson. If you're watching on YouTube here, we've got some highlights running as we talk over this pick. Is a 23-year-old forward / big man from Gonzaga, 6'8", 225 pounds. I know we were just talking before we went live here, Spooney, about trying to find the true height of Anton Watson here. Did I just call him Anton Walker a second ago? If I did, I apologize. Anton Watson, currently listed at 6'8", but he looks so much bigger in these highlights that we're seeing here, Spooney. He shot 41.2% from 3 last year on 14.5 points per game, 7 boards, and 2.6 assists per game. But his college career 3-point average is just 30%. So the shooting is a recent development. Spooney, what are your sort of overall thoughts on Anton Watson here?
Yeah. So they're playing Purdue in these highlights, and I'm trying to catch him next to Zach Edey, who's legitimately 7'4", and he does not look that much smaller than Zach Edey. So I do not believe that 6'8". I wonder if it was when he was a freshman or a sophomore, and he's grown a little bit, because he does not look just 2 inches taller than Baylor. I'm blanking on his name. What is it?
Scheierman?
Scheierman, thank you. He looks huge out there, man. And it seems like he's got a pretty interesting selection of skills. He looks like he's a good screen setter from what I've watched, which is just really important to do. It's such an underrated skill. My concern with him is is the shooting real? But it seems his catch and shoot shot looks just fine, and that's all he needs to be able to do. We don't need him taking pull-ups. And 2, is he one of those guys who's like a C at everything? He's good at everything in college, but which means he's not good at anything in the NBA, if that makes sense. He's a jack of all trades, master of none, and he's just not good enough at any one thing to really carve out a role in the NBA.
Yeah, interesting. Whereas Scheierman, clearly he has at least one elite NBA skill set with his shooting there. So interesting to see what happens here with Anton Watson. The fact of the matter is, he probably won't see the floor for the Boston Celtics primary team at all this year. He's an older player though, so it's interesting to draft someone with that sort of short-term roadmap to play them predominantly in Maine all year. But he's going to be 24 in October. So developmentally, at least from a physical standpoint, you have to imagine the ceiling is close to being reached there. But Brad Stevens said in his post-draft presser tonight, what did he say? Brad Stevens said he believes in Anton Watson's shooting even more than Watson does. Quote, I want him to come in here with the mindset of let it fly like he's never let it fly before, which is just an awesome green light, which I don't know if that will cascade down to Joe Mazzulla's coaching staff, but still, you love to hear it from Brad Stevens. I've copy-pasted the Sam Vecini evaluation of Anton Watson here. He goes on to say, Anton Watson is one of my sneaky favorites in this draft class, and I have a 2-way grade on him. I think he can defend within an NBA scheme right away and has potential to add a lot of value on that end of the court. If his offense improves enough to keep him on the floor, he's switchable and long, plus has great strength and good hip flexibility to stay on balance in his space. His help defense is sharp, and he's a good scramble defender. Offensively, I don't love his skill package, even if he maintains his ability to cut and finish around the rim. Shooting is the key for me here, says Sam Vecini. There are some signs of Watson becoming a capable shooter, as he made 41% on limited attempts this year, but it's hard to buy into his jumper becoming a consistent NBA weapon, given that he turns 24 this year and has always been a low-volume attempter. He goes on to say, and to finish up the evaluation here, if he can improve his shooting to the point where he consistently hits corner threes, his defense may be valuable enough to stick in the NBA. That will take some time for his jumper to come around. Still, I'd be willing to bet a two-way deal on expediting that process, because if it does, Watson has some value in the NBA. Thoughts, Spoonie?
He looks comfortable to me offensively, just from like a ball handling, handoff game type of stuff, where you can use him in a lot of different ways, pick and pop, pick and roll. And so one thing I noticed in the stats that I think is really encouraging, he had a career high usage rate this year and a career low turnover percentage, which is like, when those two things start splitting away, that's just really encouraging. Like, you're getting more of the ball and you're turning it over less. And he has been absurdly efficient basically his entire career since he started playing regular minutes in his sophomore season. 620 true shooting percentage this year. It was 627 last year. Had a little dip, and then it was 650 in his sophomore season. So he's a great rim finisher, apparently. And I wonder if sort of the lack of vertical athlete, like, he doesn't seem like a bad vertical athlete to me, but I don't know if he's like NBA plus type vertical athlete. So if the rim finishing comes down a little bit, it's going to make that jumper even more important. So that really appears to be the major thing for Watson.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like what you said about how he might be grade-wise a C in all sort of skill sets or skill points. And, that's not necessarily a good thing in terms he's not coming into the league with an elite NBA skill, but do you try and see if he can hit on one of those? If he's okay at absolutely everything, can he be really good at one or two of those things? Like, is that the thing that you're sort of looking for in your evaluation of this player throughout Summer League and certainly throughout the upcoming season? He's going to have a lot of playing time, I think, in Maine to see if he can exhibit any of those skill sets. But it was described as KOC in his draft primer as an old Al Horford, which I think means like today's Horford's skill set in a much younger body, which is an interesting take, but speaks to the heart of Celtics fans everywhere. Do you see any of old Al Horford in his game here with the 2 minutes of highlights that we've seen?
Yeah, so I did do some dedicated research before we got on. So there was like a 50-minute YouTube video online, and I watched maybe 15, 20 minutes of it. So obviously I'm an expert on his game. I think it's sort of the flip side of offensively. If you're kind of a master of none, that can be a bad thing. But defensively, that's kind of a good thing. Like, if you're just average at everything defensively in a 6'8", 6'9" body with a 7-foot wingspan, that comes out as a plus defender if you just like have no defensive weaknesses. Yeah, maybe you're not Jaylen Brown locking people down with the handle, or Tatum breaking things up off ball like crazy. But if you're just like a good, solid NBA defender, good, solid help defender, and can hit the glass, that's a good thing. It's the offensively where you get concerned about, like, well, what the hell is he going to do out there? So I think the defensive floor being like, hey, this guy's probably not going to suck on that end and might be like incredibly good, makes him a really good bet, especially, again, it really just keeps coming back to the shooting being real. And I think Eric Weiss in the chat here said his role had a lot to do with his shot profile. And yeah, he only took 1.5 threes a game this year. And yeah, Gonzaga used him, it looked like, as kind of a weak side dunker spot dude, or setting the screen on the pick and roll and getting downhill, or running dribble handoffs and getting downhill as the roll man with the occasional pop. So, I mean, it's encouraging. His shot looks solid to me. Like, he's nice and square. It looks really clean. Yeah, absolutely good form. So, look, it's the 54th pick, right? Like, the fact that you can imagine this guy has an NBA role, I think is a good thing.
I can see him hoisting the Larry O'B at the end of the year, or whatever the Summer League equivalent of that trophy is. Jake Eisenberg was talking about in the Celtics blog playback stream today live during the draft, and I think yesterday on the round one recap with our mate Eric Weiss, about how Brad's like foundation for a player that he'd like to draft is shooting with size, and you can look at that with Sam Hauser, and certainly with Baylor Scheierman. I just lost the name in my mind as well there for a second, Spoonie. With Baylor Scheierman, who's like 6'6", 180 pounds, like definitely not a small player by any means. And now here with Anton Watson, at the very least, is a big enough guy who hopefully can be taught to defend, and definitely seems to be, from his draft profile, has a good mindset as far as like his on-court awareness, and he can shoot as well. So you start from that Brad Stevens like favorite player foundation, and you look developmentally to build up from there. So you'll have to see a bit of consistency coming out of the draft after years of like, are we going to draft anyone at all? Are we going to trade all the picks? Like, what's happening? We don't really have any like sample size to formulate an opinion on Brad Stevens as a player drafter. And now we're starting to develop enough sample size where we can start to see a pattern here, which I think is pretty cool. Do you have any thoughts on Baylor Scheierman? I know we got the full breakdown from Jake and Eric Weiss yesterday. And if you haven't heard that podcast, it's up on our YouTube channel as well as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, everywhere. Go and listen to that because that's a really in-depth analysis of that pick. But Spoonie, you're a bit of a college guy. Any thoughts on the Scheierman pick?
I am a Big 12 guy, and Creighton's in the Big East, so I just forgot his name, so I don't want to act like I'm an expert. Although I crash coursed him today. I looked into him a ton. Real quick, one thing we don't talk about with Danny's drafting, he took Romeo Langford and Aaron Nesmith in back-to-back drafts. Both of those dudes had serious injuries the year before they were drafted. Like, wow, that's a fucking wild man move. Nesmith only played like 15 games, and Langford was like had a broken wrist that he was playing with. I never really thought about that, but what a fucking insane thing to do. Just like, yeah, these guys were fucking hurt as shit. Let's draft them. But anyway, that's totally unrelated. Scheierman, I think, like, you know, I don't really have a ton to add that Eric and Jake didn't cover. And yeah, it was an excellent podcast that they had last night. It just seems to me like, I said it on the stream, it's kind of a boring pick, which is totally fine when you're the defending champs. You want boring players who can slot into a pretty clear NBA role. And like Scheierman, I think, is kind of a sturdy dude. Like, he's not built like a linebacker or anything, but he just seems tough. He's got like the football player background. His shot is good. It's good. It's great-ish, but it's not like Sam Hauser, I'm at 43% for my career in college. Like, he shot 38% this year and 36% the year before. He takes some absolute dog shit shots. I was saying to Jake on the stream earlier today on the playback, like, he is the dude where it's like there's 4 seconds on the shot clock and he's begging for the ball so he can take the most ridiculous shot possible. It's like, oh, good, I got it. I'm 30 feet out. I can't wait to let this thing fly. So I think that's definitely got some to do with it. His shot is kind of a little wonky looking. I don't know how to describe it, but it's almost like he like really flicks it at the end or something, which is a little strange, but it's, it goes in, it's repeatable. I don't think there's anything particularly ugly about it. And just like lefty strokes can be a little weird for some reason. It's like my mind can't comprehend the wrong hand shooting the ball or something, but
sure.
Yeah. And he just, dribble pass shoot guy, decent size. And, I wouldn't be shocked if he isn't an NBA player, though, like from the defensive standpoint. Like, maybe he just can't stay in front of anybody. And then at that point, it's like, okay, well, your shooting's never going to make up for that in our system. So I don't know, Ben, what are your thoughts about him?
Yeah, no, you pretty much nailed it. It's sort of the things aside from the shooting that stand out to me, the many evaluations that he's just like this heady player, and you can look at his successful high school quarterbacking career as like an extension of that. But the fact that he's like a solid rebounder for his size, he's a great off-ball mover as well, and just has a great mind for the game. These are sort of the traits that, aside from like a really obvious elite skill set that are compatible with any system, any franchise, but particularly Joe Mazzulla, who's so mindset focused and so mindset driven and has spent the last 2 seasons absolutely drilling those qualities into his team. From what we read about Scheierman here, he's very compatible in the mindset sense as well, with some of those additional intangible qualities as well. So I'm excited to see him. Either of these players, actually, before I get to this question, just to address a comment in the chat, Anton Watson, not Anton Walker. Last year when we traded for Drew Holiday, I think I called him Drew Bledsoe about 20 times before I finally got used to it. I'm going through a similar adjustment period. I am an idiot, so I do apologize for that. Anton Watson, thank you, Lucas, in the chat. Are either of these players better than Jordan Walsh is currently, in your opinion?
So, man, Walsh is really raw, but he has sort of like an electric athleticism that I think can be kind of game-changing in a way that neither of these guys have. I would say I think Scheierman is probably like if you're like, okay, we need somebody to play 10 minutes for 2 weeks, I think the nod is going to Scheierman right now. I wonder if that's different by the end of the season. But, Antoine Walker, he was a great power forward. I can't believe we drafted him again. But no, I don't know with Watson, man. Like he's 24 and Walshy's 20, right? Like I don't think it's a crime to say, Watson's like a better basketball player than Walshy is right this second. But Walsh has the potential to blow past both of them, which is why I think we love him and why he's so tantalizing. And I think it'll happen quick. Like he'll just figure it out. The shot will just start going in and it'll be like, oh, now they guard me. And now I can drive a closeout. Wow, this makes the game so much easier. But Walshy's pretty fucking erratic defensively right now. Like he's a little all over the place. Yeah.
The irony of how lost he gets on defense, given like his defensive, how his defensive skill set was highlighted before being drafted, and how lost he gets, at least in the team schematic defensive standpoint. Like, one-on-one, he's an excellently effective defender. And I think you can see that, admittedly in garbage time, but certainly playing in Maine as well. But yeah, Walsh gets completely lost from like a team rotational defense standpoint, despite his defensive prowess. So it's going to be interesting to see how like a year, I don't know, like studying abroad, if you will, like studying under the tutelage of a championship NBA team will affect his sort of on-court mindset and placement and things like that, and whether that gives him a one-up on these guys who haven't played an NBA game yet. But you would have certainly imagined that the maturity and just the sort of added length of their careers with these two guys drafted in the last 24 hours for the C's, that's going to be an advantage to them against Walsh.
Yeah, these dudes are like Jason Tatum's age. You know what I mean? Like they're a year younger than Jason Tatum. So DJ Daniel in the chat, love Walsh, but he'll never play a meaningful minute for the Celtics. That's the exact same stuff people were saying when we drafted Peyton Pritchard. I remember the Reddit being like, oh, Maine got its new starting point guard. Like, what is Danny thinking? This is the worst draft pick of all time. Like, you just can't make declarations like that. And I get it, man. Like we like to go out on a limb. It's draft time, so I respect it. I'm not like trying to go at you or anything. I'm just saying I don't think you can count that out. Like he's clearly got physical tools and he's clearly got kind of an interesting skill set. So I was wondering like your thoughts on the approach, because last year I think we were all expecting Brad to go like junior, senior, upperclassman who's ready to play, and he went the complete opposite. I think Walsh is like the second or third youngest guy. Are you like, do you understand? Like, I guess it's just strange to me that now he's like completely flipped it, and now he's going for like 2 fifth-year seniors. It's kind of weird, right?
Yeah, well, we're so hamstrung by the CBA and being up against that second apron that there's just like nothing we can do from a player acquisition standpoint. And so then you're like, okay, we may need to lean into the deeper portions of our roster at some point throughout the course of this season. If we get to that point, when we do have to cross that bridge, do we want upperclassmen, more mature aged players who have some sort of head on their shoulders and some idea how to play like fundamentally the game of basketball, or do we want that 18, 19-year-old Walshy style upside swing? And the answer is clearly the former. You want someone who's maybe theoretically at least somewhat more reliable, which is where I guess the Scheierman types of picks come into play. I think that if we are having to lean, I know that if we are having to lean on those guys too heavily at some points throughout the regular season, we've probably got bigger problems to worry about. I do wonder with KP, like he's going to be out 5 or 6 months now after that surgery, apparently. Do we see, I don't know, at least a trial run of Watson at some point early in the regular season, depending on how we end up building out our big man depth? But yeah, to answer your question, I think the approach is very much more like, unfortunately, we may need to rely on these guys at some point. So let's make sure they're all grown up and kind of know what they're all about.
Yeah, and I think contractually as well, right? Like if these guys are good, if it's going to take Walshy another 2 or 3 years, but if he's good in the last year of his rookie deal, it's like, well, shit, now we can't afford him, right? Whereas these guys, it's like, okay, maybe their rookie year's not great, but they're probably either going to be good their second year or never going to be good. So you get essentially their prime years on a rookie scale contract. And then, it's like, okay, well, we're not going to give you that big second contract, but thanks for 3 years of good role player play at, $3 million a year. Yeah. Whereas Walshy, it's like, if he comes good, it's almost like he's just going to be really expensive. Like we have to pay more money to get his prime years than we would with these guys. So I think the mixed approach makes a lot of sense. Like, I wonder if Brad's just like, I've got my board, like age is a factor, but I'm balancing all these other things. Jordan Walsh was the top of my board at that pick. And it was Scheierman this year at 30 and it was Anton Watson at 54. And that's like, I'm just following my board, but cause I don't think he cares about fit. Cause like, he's just drafting wings, baby. This is 3 wings in a row.
Yeah.
Who can all shoot. Well, Walshy, not really, but.
Well, his shot's coming along in Maine there at least. It's definitely improved throughout the season. But yeah, in the NBA, he can't really throw anything in the ocean. But time will tell to see how that develops. Is it fair to say that Walshy still has the highest ceiling with admittedly the little that we know about all 2 of these recent acquisitions? Is it fair to say Walshy still has the highest upside?
Yeah, I think so. Just from like, ceiling, a lot of is just like how athletic are you, and then can you build skills on top of that athleticism? Obviously, there's more to it. Like some guys just see and feel the game better than other dudes, and that's not totally a teachable skill. Mm-hmm. But I think just like Walshy's pure athleticism, and he is like, what's his wingspan? Like 7'1", 7'2". Yeah, Anton Watson's like 2 inches taller than him, 1.5 inches taller than him, and it's 7-foot wingspan. So like Walshy probably has the same standing reach. So he's just a freak athletically, man, and he's shown the ability to see the court, like to read the game, to make correct decisions. Like we were kind of memeing, but he made the right play when he's out there playing with like Svi Mihailuk and, Pritchard putting up 10 shots in 5 minutes. But Walshy's like, I'll drive this closeout, then I'll kick it next, or like quick swing, let me set this screen. And it's like, that's the shit you want to see from him late in games. And I think he understands how to play basketball, which is great with that combo of athleticism. It's just like, game's just a little too fast for him right now,
Yeah, I fully agree. And all of that said, I hope that he like puts his head down and tries to like get his a little bit in summer league. I know it's a selfish desire of mine as a fan because we want him ideally to play the right way, quote unquote. But I want to see him get his this summer league. I can't wait to see that in person. Couple of closing points very quickly. Shorter show tonight, but look, whatever your opinion is on the Bronny James thing, like the supposed nepotism, whether or not developmentally he's Woj made some good points that like the league is kind of rife with nepotism, and this is just an instance of that happening on a very public stage, which I thought was a fair point. But I also think it's like pretty fucking cool, like the first ever father-son duo to be in the league at the same time, regardless of the circumstances, and they are kind of shady, and the whole Rich Paul telling teams not to draft Bronny James. If they do, he'll go play in Australia. Meanwhile, as an Australian resident, I'm like, please, let's see that happen. I would love for Bronny James to come down here and play some hoop in the NBL. But just curious to hear your thoughts, Spoonie. It's kind of a silly situation, especially like in our world. We've just won the title. We've drafted all these guys who will probably barely see the court, if at all, this whole season. We're focused on Banner 19. Meanwhile, there's all this kind of bullshit going on with the Lakers. Just curious to hear your thoughts.
Meanwhile, the Lakers are a fucking clown show, dude. Yes. This is ridiculous. Like, just let him hit free agency and sign him on a 2-way. Like, you're blowing. I get it's the 55th pick. It probably doesn't matter, but it's just indicative of the fact that LeBron completely controls that entire organization, and he's probably going to be an owner once he retires of it.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous. Like, I get that nepotism runs rampant, and I'm pretty sure Jalen Brunson's dad got a job with the Knicks right before he signed there. So like, yeah, it happens. We've never seen it happen in the draft before, have we? I mean, did Dunleavy pick his son, actually? I can't remember. Because was Dunleavy the coach of the Clippers when they picked Luke or Mike? Or Golden State?
Oh,
I think he went to Golden State. He might have been. He might have picked his son, now that I think about it. And look, hey, anytime you're following Mike Dunleavy Sr., that's not a good sign. He's not exactly the beacon of well-run organizations. So.
Yes.
It's just so classic LA. And I knew it once we didn't take him. I was like, oh, they're absolutely fucking drafting him. And I guess it's a cool story. If it were any other father, I would be all for it and think it's awesome, but it's LeBron. So yeah, I can't help but hate it.
Good luck to the kid. Good luck to Bronny. Cause like there's a lot of and he's under this massive cloud of bullshit, mostly formulated by his old man. And I just hope that he can find a groove for himself and carve out a role for himself and be successful in his own right. Because just as a human being, you kind of want that for anyone. But another interesting point to wrap up the show here and to wrap up the second round of the draft, Jonathan Gavoni had this on ESPN, I guess, on Kyle Filipowski, quote, NBA teams are talking about the fact that they had question marks about his girlfriend being so much older than him. Why was he estranged from his family because of this whole situation? And apparently he doesn't talk to his parents or his brother. It's a very odd situation. There was talk about being taken hostage by Mormons. And of course, then he's very appropriately drafted by Danny Ainge into the Utah Jazz there. Filipowski is a guy that I allowed myself to get very high on in the 24 hours leading up to the draft. Skill set wise, I think there was no question that he would have been a really good fit for the Celtics and really any other NBA team. And then we hear this story come out. A little bit we're bringing this up because it's a bit of a dry show. We don't have a lot of content to run with today, but it is interesting and unique that this sort of storyline would emerge right as the players drafted. So I don't know. If you don't have any thoughts on this, Spoonie, I would completely forgive you, but just curious to hear your take.
Yeah, at the risk of getting canceled, because I feel like I'm towing a line here, but isn't it strange, assuming... his brother, I saw some tweets from his brother saying he was groomed by this woman. Isn't it kind of weird to hold that against him? He's the victim, and we're
Yes.
holding that against him in the NBA draft. That's kind of not his fault if he was brainwashed as a child. What are we doing here, NBA? That's pretty friggin' harsh, I think. So, I don't know, man. That's just bizarre. It's nothing I've ever heard before in the NBA draft.
Yeah, so look, we'll be keeping an eye on that because it's a unique set of circumstances, if nothing else. And the Tatum tweet yesterday being a lot of teams are going to regret passing on this guy, I think just adds a little bit of a Celtic flavor to it all. But yeah, again, best wishes to the kid himself. I hope that he finds a way to overcome that because that's pretty nasty. But look, we're going to leave it there on that note.
Hold on, real quick, Ben.
Yeah, okay,
we make
thanks.
fun of the Lakers one more time?
Okay, yes, go ahead.
Somebody, might have been Woj, tweeted, it was the second they drafted Dalton Connect, JJ Redick started drawing pin down actions for him.
Oh,
it's
God.
The coach was coaching his player that he drafted.
A pin down action?
Yeah, it's the most simple action in basketball history. It's what are we talking about here? This is what's news in LA right now. It's ridiculous. Sorry, I just had to get that out.
No, I'm glad you brought that up. It is ridiculous. Maybe he's just recording future B-roll for the next Mind the Game podcast when he's fired halfway through the year. We'll see. But look, we'll leave it there. That's going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for joining us. We will be back early next week where there'll be plenty to discuss. There are a number of trades around the league today. As it stands, we don't know if Kentavious Caldwell-Pope will be back with the Nuggets next year, for example. Kristaps Porzingis had his surgery. We've got Summer League to preview. It simply does not stop around the league, and especially here on the First of the Floor YouTube channel. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of these upcoming podcasts. Wayne Spoonie, love your work, man. Until next time, go Celts.
I love